Hello and welcome to another edition of Power of the Pen. I'm LaWanna Bradford and I'm excited because today we have a very special guest. We're going to take you through the journey of his writing experience, what it means to be a profitable, money-making author, and then we're going to go into two of his special books that are a tribute and a salute to his mother and father, none other than Brian K. Wright. Brian K. Wright is a best-selling author. He's a writing coach. He is a radio show host and the editor of an amazing magazine. And we're going to get into that as well. So in just a moment, we will see Mr. Brian K. Wright. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for joining and for this conversation about Between the Lines, a son's journey and an author's calling. And you and I have known each other for a few years, and I noticed that recently you've been showcasing these two books that are a tribute to your mother and father. And I definitely want to get into that because both Mother and Father's Day are around the corner. Mm-hmm. But before that, I'd like to just talk to you about and get your insight on the business of writing. Because many people are excited, right? I've checked off this bucket list. I've written my book. And then they're disappointed because people aren't running to Amazon or to any online bookstores to buy their book. They have, very limited sales. So if you could just sort of unpackage some tips on how to monetize the book beyond the sale.
Sure. I think a lot of people do aspire to sell thousands and thousands, even millions of copies. Very few people actually do that. In fact, I believe the average book will sell maybe 250 copies in its entire lifetime. So then the question begs, as you asked, how do I make money writing my book? I would say that you can make a lot more money with what you do with the book when it's done than you do actually selling it. When I work with my clients, I talk to them about leveraging their books into speaking opportunities, because sometimes when you speak on stage, you have a chance to promote your book on stage. You have a chance to sell your book on stage. You have a chance to sell your book in the back of the room. The event planner you're speaking for might have a budget to buy a copy for every single person in the audience at a discounted rate, and then you get to sign everyone's book and talk to them individually after it's done. You feel like a celebrity when you get to do that. I have also done Barnes & Noble bookstore signings with one of my books. When I did a book with Morgan James Publishing, they had distribution. That's the advantage of working with a publisher, is they have distribution to major bookstore chains. And so I did probably 15 Barnes & Noble book signings in the Phoenix area to promote that book over the course of maybe a 12-month period. You can start mastermind programs. You can start coaching programs. You can host retreats around the topic of your expertise, because honestly, you can charge way more to speak at an event. You can charge way more to host an event and have people pay to attend. You can charge way more for a mastermind with recurring monthly or annual fees than you can selling a $20 book. And so people can make a lot of money when they look beyond just the book. The book is not the end. It is the beginning of a much bigger journey. And so the book is a tool for you to get there. The book is not the final piece to the puzzle. It's what you do with the book once you're done that can make a very lucrative income for you.
I like what you said, that the book is the beginning, not the end. And I think most people think, okay, yes, check, done. You're happy, you do your selfies with your book, showing everyone what you've done, and you've had your book signing, or maybe your online book launch, virtual book launch, or on-site launch. But I like what you're saying here about the speaking part. Now, what if someone listening, Brian, says, that sounds great, but I'm not a public speaker? Is that something that you can help coach writers into positioning themselves to speak publicly?
I can. I haven't been asked to do a lot of that. But I used to teach public speaking in a college. That was a long, long time ago. But if someone wants to talk about that, we can talk about what their hangups are about speaking and help people figure out what their actual message is going to be. Now, I will also say, if you've got a book, I certainly hope the message part has been decided long ago, right? So if you're going to be doing a talk based on the content in your book, it shouldn't be that hard to put the actual talk together. I think the piece that stops people is, I'm afraid to do this. I don't want to look foolish. I don't want to look dumb. But I will tell you, you're being viewed as the expert when you're on stage. And if you make a mistake in your speech, most people aren't going to know the difference. Don't memorize your speech. Have your outline, know your talking points, because you're talking about something that you already know a lot about. So if you've got your talking points and you've got the stories behind your talking points, you are very well on your way to doing well. Now, I would also say, in terms of promoting the actual book, a lot of people make the mistake of not promoting the book anymore a day or two after it's done. In fact, I had a client ask me the day after launch, do I need to post again? Yes, this is your baby. You don't stop feeding your baby just because it's born. You have to continue the journey. In fact, one thing I did with my greatest lessons I learned from my dad and greatest lessons I learned from my mom, as you alluded to earlier, Mother's Day and Father's Day is right around the corner. I wrote a book that I have an excuse to promote every year. I mean, think about this. Why do musicians do Christmas albums? Because the stations that play Christmas music hopefully will play their music for a whole month every single year. I mean, Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas Is You, she makes at least $2 million every single year on that one song. So yeah, she's very happy to have created a song that will live on and on and on and on. Think about Michael Jackson's Thriller song. It gets played on Halloween every single year. You think about Prince when he had his song 1999. I'm guessing he was probably forward thinking enough back in the early 1980s that people might all of a sudden rediscover a song in the year 1999, and it got played nonstop for an entire year. And by then, Prince wasn't necessarily at the height of his music sales career, but he was still a very vibrant performer. And he's one of those artists that people would pay a lot of money to see, even if he didn't have current content. But Prince was a pretty prolific writer anyway. We were always waiting to see what Prince was going to do next. But the idea being, if you create something where you have an excuse to bring it out over and over and over again, it's a great hook.
Yeah, I like what you said, and I also love the examples that you gave. And like you said, with your book, every year there's a reason to say, "Oh, and by the way," right? Yeah. And you always you always have the opportunity to attract new readers who may not even know about you.
Yeah. In fact, I moved back to my hometown 3 years ago, and a lot of people know that I'm an author, but when I post my books on social media, a lot of the people I grew up with who know my parents very well all bought my books.
I love that.
So yeah, you've got a built-in audience. People that you went to school with will probably say, oh my gosh, you wrote a book. I'll buy it. I'll support you. The people in your current network, your business network, your personal network, they will buy books. In fact, here's a trick. If you have posted your book on Amazon, ask people to buy multiple copies. Ask people to buy 10 copies of your book to give away to the people that they love the most. And you might even give people a freebie or an incentive of some kind if they could show you proof of purchase that they bought a certain number of copies, like 5, like 10. You might give them a free download of something. You might give them a free audio of a masterclass. You might give them a free ticket to your event that you're hosting if you're hosting an event. But give them a reason to buy more than one book. Obviously, they don't necessarily need 10 copies of your book. But if they keep one and give the other 9 away, those are people who may then want to invest with you and buy whatever else you've written.
F. Scott Fitzgerald stated, "Don't write because you want to say something. Write because you have something to say." There are thousands of people waiting to read your book and hear your message. Be a guest on the Power of the Pen TV series. To complete your application and schedule your interview, call 404-618-2824 today. The world is waiting for you.
Power of the Pen with LaWanna Bradford, expanding the impact and influence of authors from around the world. If you want to change the world, pick up your pen and write, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Books are uniquely portable magic. Power of the Pen spotlights authors from around the world. Listen as authors share messages that educate, motivate, inspire, and entertain. Join us each Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern on e360tv.com.
So it's really interesting. I mean, going back to music examples again, you want to create super fans. My favorite artist is Elton John. Back in the day, I would buy everything he did because I'm a super fan. So if you've created something at least once that is mind-blowing and amazing, and the next thing you do is also mind-blowing and amazing, I probably will commit to buying whatever you do for the rest of your career. That's the kind of audience you want. If you've got, let's just say, 1,000 super fans in your back pocket, you can make a pretty decent living. Whether you're releasing a book, whether you're releasing a masterclass, whether you're planning an event, if you've got a fair number of them raise their hand and say, yeah, I'll do that. And they'll tell others. Remember, I mean, you and I are probably about the same age. Remember that shampoo commercial way back in the day? And they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and so on and so on and so on. Yes. It's true. It's true.
Yes.
If you create something great, it's always better. And this is one of my favorite mantras. It's always better to have a happy customer with a big mouth than an unhappy customer with a big mouth.
Yeah.
Because the unhappy customers usually have a much bigger mouth.
I love these examples. I mean, this is just brilliant. And sometimes we overthink things, but these are low-hanging fruit, and it's no cost. Like you said, if you're speaking at an event and you can have a conversation with the host to say, well, I have these books. This could be part of the package. You know, you attend and you also get this book. And just really, really good. Very, very creative ideas of how we can begin to monetize. And I love what you said about the super fan. I didn't think of wording it that way, but yeah, you want to create this following, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the Elton John example again, he recently just released an album with Brandi Carlile, Elton John's songs aren't on the radio anymore, but he has enough of a following that he's built up over decades of excellence that album, the week it got released, was number 9 on the Billboard Top 200 album chart.
Yeah.
And he was doing the rounds. He was everywhere. He was on all the nighttime shows. He was on all the podcasts with Brandi Carlile, and they promoted the heck out of this album for about 2 weeks, and a lot of people bought it. So that's the other thing too, is when you release a book, you need to get on other people's shows like this very fine show, Power of the Pen, and have an opportunity to talk about your book. Even better, have your own podcast where you have a license and excuse to talk about your book every single episode, just a little snippet. But gosh, I'll tell you one other thing I did that I thought was a pretty cool idea. Both of these books, the Mom and Dad book, were collaborative books. And so I had other people contribute a chapter to each of those books. And I charged people a little bit for the privilege of being in the book. But that helped me with my production and marketing, and a little extra for me because I put this together. But it gave other people a platform to now be called a published author. And they got to share their story too. So if you question whether you have enough to say, doing a collaborative book might be a great way. Write a chapter in someone else's book first if you want to. That will give you some confidence. Write magazine articles. I publish Ultimate Achievers magazine, and LaWanna, you're a subscriber and a very faithful author, and I'm very glad that you're in my I don't want to say pen of authors that write with me, but that's basically it. So just do a lot of writing, because someone will notice you and you will have no idea how it happened. It's because you kept planting seeds. So just write something every day. In fact, I would say if you're struggling to know what topic your book should be about, if you've journaled, you probably will have some great ideas, especially if certain topics keep coming up over and over and over again. That might be a clue that this is something you shouldn't just keep to yourself between you and your diary or journal, but you maybe should consider sharing it with the world. And I will also say, please make sure you've solved the problem that you've been marinating on before you write a book, because people are looking for solutions to their problems. They're not looking to just commiserate with you, because if you don't have a solution to the problem you're talking about, people are just going to think you're whining, and no one wants to listen to a whiner for very long, especially if they spent money on it. They're going to be really upset.
No, exactly. So let's talk to just a little bit of, going to go back in time, your journey of writing. What prompted you to, number one, just because some people say, well, I don't really like to write, but this is a gifting that you've tapped into and have continued throughout your lifespan. And now you're showing up in so many different ways and helping other people through expressing their thoughts and ideas in writing. Yeah. Where did that come from? Was it always there? Was that always a gift, or was that something you had to really work to cultivate?
I think it's a little bit of both. I've always wanted to be a writer. When I was in elementary school and I had my homework done and I was sitting in study hall, I would write episodes of TV shows that I was watching, Lost in Space, the Underdog cartoon. I would write episodes with the established characters. And so I wasn't creating my own universe of, I wasn't writing the next Star Wars. I was writing stuff that I was already familiar with, and I would just create new adventures for all these characters to be on. And it was a lot of fun. And in fact, in high school, I started trying to write a time travel novel, and I wrote myself into a corner and gave up. So, that's something you learn as a writer too, is, I didn't know a lot about time travel. I think my conundrum was I put my characters back in time and I didn't know how to get them back to the present day. And so I just gave up. But it does stretch the imagination. If you do write every day, it will stretch your imagination, and not everything you write is going to be amazing. In fact, I think I read, I saw a Facebook post. I'm trying to remember now who the musician was. I know, Dolly Parton is one of the most prolific songwriters out there right now. She's written thousands and thousands of songs, but not all of them are hits. In fact, you have to write a lot of stuff that maybe isn't great before you stumble on something that is. And sometimes when you're in the flow, you will have a zone of genius that you just can't stop. In fact, did you know that Dolly Parton wrote I Will Always Love You and Jolene in the same evening?
I didn't know that she wrote them in the same evening.
Yeah, that was a multi-million-dollar night for her.
Wow.
So sometimes lightning strikes, and when you get that inspiration, write until you cannot write anymore. Don't just stop and say, I'm going to stop after 30 minutes, because you can't just flip on and off the inspiration. When something grabs your attention, run with it until you can't run anymore.
So in your example of Prince, he was known to, compose for hours and hours, sometimes days on end without stopping. Right. Hence we have the vault of just these amazing, pieces that were waiting to be released.
Yeah. So. Yeah. In fact, some of it probably isn't amazing enough for us to hear, but I bet there's still something in there that we should hear. I hope it happens. There's a really amazing book out there that is not my book, but I want to point it out. It's by John Kremer, Kremer, John Kremer. It's called 1001 Ways to Market Your Book. Jack Canfield talked about that book in the Success Principles. In fact, when he and Mark Victor Hansen were promoting Chicken Soup for the Soul, they bought this book and they committed to doing every single one of them. And over the course of the next few years, that's how their book ended up getting some traction. That book did not get traction right away. It took a long time for them to build momentum, but very much like a bamboo tree, you plant the seed and nothing happens for maybe 3, 4, 5 years. And all of a sudden in 90 days, it's, it just sprouts and just grows hundreds of feet in the air, and you wonder where this came from. Well, it had to spend a lot of time building the foundation first. You're not going to get a tree that tall without having a strong foundation first. So sometimes it takes a really long time to build the right foundation. But yeah, read that book. I have it, and I go back to it once in a while, and it's a pretty cool resource. But when you purchase a resource like that and you actually start doing some of the things that are suggested, some great things can happen. But something else Jack Canfield talks about is called the rule of 5. Commit to doing 5 things every single day to move you forward toward your goal. Yes. It's like chopping down a tree with an axe.
I want to go back to the book you suggested. So 1,001 ways to market your book. What was your, I mean, there's a lot of choices to pick, but what would you think your one thing that you walked away with, like, wow, this is an interesting step to take?
Yeah, I think the idea of developing your community was a really great idea. And he talked about, if you've got a community, it doesn't have to be a large community, but if you've got a very faithful community, you can do a lot of things. If you've got an email list of, let's just say 1,000 people, or you get 1,000 people. I mean, not many events sell 1,000 tickets, but if you get 1,000 people to buy your book, and you know who those people are on Amazon, you don't know who these people are because they don't share who bought your book. But if you steer people toward your site and you capture your own traffic, you'll know exactly who bought your book, especially if you attach a free something or other to the purchase of your book. Then because now you have an audience, not only who is a fan of yours, but you have an audience of people who have actually bought from you before. The hardest thing to do is to find someone who will buy from you the first time. If they bought from you the first time and it's really great, they will have no problem buying from you again.
Do you think that a person should have, because you mentioned having your own website, leading people to that, is it best to be both on Amazon or some major publisher platform?
I would advocate. Yeah, I would advocate being on Amazon too. In fact, what some people do is they'll share the Amazon link on their site, but to take advantage of the free thing, they'll say, come back to my site with the proof of purchase, and submit that as an attachment. And now we know you bought your book on Amazon. And also ask for Amazon reviews. People will sometimes buy your book because you had some great reviews, and don't just have 1 or 2, have a lot of reviews. I'm like, wow, if hundreds of people liked this book, then maybe it's good. And just know that some people will just post a negative review just because that's just who they are all over in life. It's not
going to be for everyone. So
it's not going to be for everyone. And, it's interesting, there's a book out there called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. It's a great, great book. Some people complain that he promoted his event too many times in his book. Well, I, as a forward-thinking entrepreneur, am not going to be offended by that. In fact, I think that's a really brilliant way to promote your next thing, is to talk about it in your book. So those kinds of 1-star reviews, those people aren't forward-thinking, and I'm not going to listen to a thing they have to say anyway.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's get into your greatest lessons that you learned from your dad and the greatest lessons you learned from your mom. Tell me how that idea came about, why you wanted to do it as a collaborative, and what has been the greatest reward for you as a writer, and how do you feel it's helped others through their journey?
That's a really terrific question. Well, my dad passed in February 2021. And as soon as he passed, I had the idea that someday I would do a book to honor his memory and the things I learned from him, because I learned a lot from my dad, but I wasn't ready right away. I had to heal first. And it took me about 6 months for me to decide, okay, I think I'm ready to do something about this. And I had ideas for some lessons that I wanted to talk about. But then I had this epiphany that maybe there are other people who are in the same boat I am. They've lost their dad. And maybe they, for a therapeutic reason, a cathartic reason, might want to share too. And so I just started putting it out there. I'm doing this book called The Greatest Lessons I Learned from My Dad. Are any of you interested in doing this? If we all chip in a little bit, just to cover the costs, is this something you'd like to do? And especially if you haven't written anything before. I had a bunch of people raise their hand. I think I had probably 28 or 30 people raise their hand and say, yes, I want to do this. And so a lot of them were super, super thankful for the opportunity to finally get it out in writing. In fact, some of the people who wrote, still have their dads with them, and they were able to give copies of this book to their dad for Christmas, which I thought was a really super cool idea. And some people had some really, really terrific stories. So I was really, really glad to be able to put that together, because not only did it help me, but it also helped a few other people who actually did the writing, and the people who bought it expressed how wonderful a resource it actually was. Now, I'll say something else. When I had all the chapters edited, when I was done with the editing, I was probably 3 or 4 days away from getting ready to put it on Amazon. And I thought there's something missing. So the last chapter was a letter to my dad. And so it gave me a chance to say all the things to my dad that I didn't have a chance to say. And it was a very, very emotional experience. When I was done writing, I read it back and I cried. It was, I still, when I go back and read it, it makes my heart very glad that I actually was able to finally put it all in writing. And so that's where that came from. Now, my mom is still with me. And I thought, well, if I did a dad book, I better do a book for mom too. And so I did. I went back to all the same people. Some of them said yes, some of them said no, because I don't have as great a relationship with my mom as I did with my dad, or my mom wasn't present in my life. And that's why some people didn't participate in the dad book too, is because, well, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad. I don't really want to write about it. And so I went through some of that. I want to, but I can't. So that's the vibe I was getting. But I did find a bunch of people who also wanted to participate in the greatest lessons I learned from my mom. And I put that one together right away. My goal was to have that, the goal behind the dad book was to have it done before Christmas, which I did. And my goal for the mom book was to have it done before the following Mother's Day, which I did, because I wanted it to be a great Mother's Day book. And before Father's Day, I started promoting the dad book all over again. And I have copies in stock. And so if people wanted to buy copies directly from me that I would sign, I would accept their PayPal and I would ship them out a signed copy. And I didn't have to share my royalty money with Amazon. So that's fine too. In fact, I still have copies of both of these in stock. But that's the story of how both of those books came about. And in fact, I was able to give the mom book to my mom in person for Mother's Day that year.
Yeah, that's priceless. I love that. I love hearing how things, the origin story, I guess, of books, and the fact that you opened the door so other people could participate. And I'm certain it was cathartic in so many ways. And would you mind doing our audience a favor and sharing out of each book your greatest lessons you learned from your mother and your father?
Okay. Here, let me just, there are so many. I'm just going to flip through the table of contents and see which one
What jumped out at you?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So when I was a kid, I had some neighbors about a block away, and they were getting their house built. The plants hadn't been, or the grass hadn't been planted yet. And we decided, for whatever reason, that it might be fun to throw clumps of dirt on the roof. We were just young boys, right? Well, I grabbed a clump of dirt that was way too big for me. I thought, oh, I think I know what this is going to be. And I heard very loud pounding footsteps toward my bedroom door. And I knew what was coming. And Dad knocked on my door, called my name. I said, come in. He asked me, did you do it? And of course, I couldn't lie about it because there were witnesses. They knew. And so I owned up to it. And they said, well, you're going to have to pay for the window. And I said, well, how much is it going to be? And he very wisely said, how much do you have? Because he knew that whatever I had wasn't going to be enough. But I got out my bright red Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer billfold, and yes, I had that. And I pulled out $3 and I had 19 cents in change. And I said, that's all I have. And he said, well, that's how much it is. So I gave up all of my money. And the lesson was, accept personal responsibility for your actions, even if it's not pleasant. And so that was a very hard lesson. I remember having that billfold. I remember giving up all that money, and I remembered having to own up to it and apologizing for what I did. So yeah, that was a very powerful and humble lesson I learned from my dad. And I think I learned the same thing from my mom a few years later in high school. Mom was on me to, get a haircut. We need to schedule a haircut for you in town. And I didn't want to get a haircut. I didn't want to sit in the barber's chair and get a haircut. So I thought, this was during the summer, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And so I started cutting my own hair. And I realized, I went up way too high. I got about halfway across my forehead. Here. I'm like, this is not going to look good at all. And Mom is certainly going to notice. And so I decided I'm going to comb my hair off to the side and maybe she won't figure it out. And my master plan was to hide from my mom for the rest of the day, so she wouldn't notice. Well, this lasted about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Then she called me out to the kitchen. And, she asked me to help her with something. And so I made sure that my back was turned toward her as often as possible. And then she said, what is wrong with you? I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. Brian, turn around. No. Turn around. She spun me around and she looked at my hair. She said, what did you do? Nothing. Then she started messing with my hair. What did you do? And when she realized, she says, okay, now we are going to go get a haircut. She was mad, big mad. Actually, no, she cut my hair herself because she didn't want to be embarrassed either. So she cut her hair myself. And thank goodness it was in the summer, so I didn't have to face the kids at school the next day. But own responsibility for actions. Be honest. Don't hide your mistakes. Just own them. There are people in your life who will help you if you are humble enough to admit where you are at fault and don't have all the answers. So yeah, I tried to cut my own hair and I tried to hide the results when it didn't go well, and it obviously did not work. And so now today I am bald, so I don't have to worry about that problem anymore. Ta-da!
I love those two shares. Thank you so much, Brian. We are almost out of time. I want to just turn it over to you. If there's anything that you want to share with the audience, what's upcoming for you, and
Okay.
just remind them again how they can get in touch with you.
What's upcoming for me? Well, continuing to produce my weekly radio show called Success Profiles Radio. Still continue to produce my magazine, which is called Ultimate Achievers Magazine. You can go to ultimateachieversmagazine.com if you want to check it out. And probably will work on my next book sometime in the near future. So that's what you probably see how to get a hold of me in the comments. If you want to talk to me about your next book idea, go to callwithbrian.com and set up a time. You can email me, brian@briankWright.com, and I'd be glad to talk with you about whatever your questions are.
Fantastic. Brian, this has been so great. Thank you so much for sharing. I just hope everyone follows you. Definitely is a great Mother's Day gift, Father's Day gift, or just a gift to yourself. The greatest lessons I've learned from my dad and greatest lessons I've learned from my mom, by Brian K. Wright.
And if I can say one more thing, you are a part of my Facebook group, Authorpreneur Live. It's a private Facebook group, but it is free to join. So find Authorpreneur Live on Facebook and let me know that you heard about us in the show here, and I'll admit you.
Love it. Thank you so very much, Brian. I appreciate you. To our listening audience, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week for a special edition of Power of the Pen. Bye for now.